everyone, Phoneybeetlemaniacxs back here with you once again. This is going to be a response to Rictugate, who did a response to my response to his original video, if that makes any sense to everybody. Anyway, I'll leave links to my original, his addendum, and to Jason Trivium's 2 videos. If there's any more videos you think I should be putting in there, let me know and I'll try and do the best I can. Anyway, without further ado, here's Rictusgate's video to me.
Video, blah 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 blah, like that. But I made some notes. I watched it a few times. I made some notes about your point of view on what substitutionary atonement actually means, because I understand that you do have a different view on it than the typical, the contemporary fundamentalist kind of view of wages of sin, damnation, hell, and all this kind of stuff, which is fine, and I'm willing to discuss these things, more than willing. So. Now, in your view, substitutionary atonement, now excuse me, I tried to summarize these things as best I could. This is one way I assimilate, I figure out information, is by rewording these things myself to see if I do understand things. So, correct me if I'm wrong. So, the substitutionary atonement is not like the courtroom example given. You say that it's more like Jesus is a helper, somebody who's there to give you a helping hand, to show you what not to do and what to do. You use the word social worker. Very interesting choice of words. I find I've never heard that before, but what you say here is that if we were left to our own devices, we would be easily swayed by evil, and that's a whole other can of monkeys, if you want to say, right there, because I mean, just using that word evil just to refer to a whole set of human behaviors that are very complex and are either explainable or being explained or looked into in some way, shape, or form via the many sciences.
Okay, maybe it was unclear, so I'll make myself more clear now. When I talked about evil, I'm talking about what we as mankind would consider to be evil acts, for example, killing, murdering, thieving, that sort of thing. Those are the sort of things that Jesus is trying to steer us away from being tempted as he was in the devil and overcoming it. That's the sort of things he's crying towards us, those sort of abilities to overcome our natural inclinations towards power, greed, wealth, being trapped by what is on earth, the easy thing that Satan's going to put in front of us, rather than going for the harder options, which is working for those sort of things. Being guided by using Satan rather than using God. That's what I meant. That it's quicker to murder somebody than it is to argue with them and make them see your point of view. That's what I meant. While these things are being discovered by science, that does not make them any less evil. They are still things that we do to our own mankind based upon our own neuroses and our own thought process. You make this decision to carry out these actions. While yes, your mental synapses are the ones that are misfiring in some cases, you're the one who decides to carry out said action, and that's why I consider that action to be evil. You've made the master thought to carry out that action. The thoughts in your head to carry out said action may be quote unquote natural. I think it's the Satan himself that sets in motion the fact that you want to do it, and the fact that you can't be unted to not do it shows that why Jesus' sacrifice was necessary. Well, let's continue.
So that would be a whole hangout of its own to talk about this concept of evil on its own. So let's ignore that. But we are easily swayed by this, so we can turn to the life of Jesus and his template, what he has put forward as the ideal life. And we can look to that and imitate that. And fine, yep, of course, that's pretty well ubiquitous across most, if not all, Christian denominations. At least that part of Jesus' life is true. That at least that interpretation of Jesus' life is true. He is the example to follow. But that's not what I'm talking about, substitutionary atonement. It might be a part of it, but it's not the whole substitution part of it, right? So you go on to say that substitutionary atonement is Jesus paying or paving the way to allow us to make mistakes, but still having a means of atoning for them. It is not a get out of jail free card, and it is not him taking the bail for you or paying bail for you or whatever. So what is it then if it's not? That's what substitute means to me. An atonement, you're atoning for sins, and the wages of sin is death, corporeal or spiritual, if you wish, ungoodness eternally. So there's a wage to be paid.
The idea of wages of sin is a very fundamentalist idea that most moderate Christian denominations do not hold to. But when you talk about the wages of sin, you're talking about, for example, the presence of evil upon mankind. That's what you're talking about. You're not talking about, for example, him having to take the ball for you, if you want to use a baseball analogy, I suppose. What it is that Jesus is on the cross paid for the wrongs you would do and atoned for them. He does not have to pay it in hell. Again, the idea of hell is something I don't really apply to. The reason I use that analogy is because the idea you're posting, I would say even the more evangelical literalists out there wouldn't hold to many of the ideas you were proposing. Maybe some very, very, very hard subsets of fundamentalism, but even then, I would have to say you're probably talking about, 10%, maybe 5% of what considers Christendom who believe in this sort of idea of, Jesus going down to conquer evil, then coming back up again. Whereas most Christendom say that he conquered death, he conquered evil on the cross by dying for us. So that idea, just because I expounded the idea doesn't mean I particularly hold to it. The idea that I was expanding was the idea that the way you were proposing the idea was not necessarily how people hold to it who are in the more fundamentalist circles. I'll propose an idea we're not holding to it, which is always a good way of knowing whether an idea sticks or not, because you can hold an idea without actually believing in it. The idea I believe in is the idea of substitution. Again, substitutional atonement is him dying on the cross and conquering death for us. That we are no longer going to the ultimate evil that is death. We now have a life beyond this. That Jesus' sacrifice opened the kingdom of heaven to all mankind. That is the whole idea of substitutionary atonement. That I and I would say majority of most Christians believe it.
Jesus stood in that place and paid that wage, but he didn't. But anyways, that to me is the crux of the substitutionary atonement thing. His life part, yeah, that's part of it, definitely, but it's part we can agree on. But this whole other thing is something altogether different. So, Jesus did not die in order for us not to go to eternal ungoodness or whatever when we die, but he died so we can overcome them in real life and be forgiven for them. So we can follow his example, dying to ourselves and being resurrected spiritually into the life of the template of Jesus in a way, right? Which is interesting. Yeah, I agree with you on all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I agree with you. But where is this final atonement? There's no atoning. There's no actual paying of this wage out by Jesus. Jesus pays his wage. But anyways, let's continue. The redemption of mankind is more like a voucher system, you say, which is interesting. So the way I understand a voucher system, okay, and in this regard, we'll put it in the context of God and Jesus and us. So the voucher system. God is the holder of the voucher. He holds the voucher. We don't. We can redeem it in a way, but he holds the voucher. And the voucher is Jesus, which can be used to redeem mankind, because God is the only one who can provide that, right? So he is the voucher holder, and Jesus is the voucher. Now, the voucher is meant to redeem mankind from the wages of sin and death. Or sin, which is death. Spiritual or corporeal. So God... So God uses his voucher. The death upon a cross is the use of the voucher. It is now being exchanged. Here's the exchange. The wages of sin have been paid in full, but why does God get the voucher back 3 days later? Vouchers are redeemable once, and let's say it's a redeemable by proxy for us. We can just say, yeah, God did that for us, so we can rely upon that voucher because that voucher clears us and we accept that. That makes sense, but the voucher's sitting right beside God again. He got it back in the mail 3 days later.
I'll probably lapse it in this, but this is going to be a bit hard for me to explain here, because I have to go into Jewish. I'm going to use a term now that is misused by a lot of people: mythology. The story of the people, of the Jewish people, because the story of the Jewish people so far is that they're taken from the tree of knowledge. God had punished them by granting them knowledge of death, and that they're going to die. And Jesus had rejoined mankind as God himself, as basically a representative of God, as God incarnate, to help mend that bridge between God and man. Now, dying was something that was visited upon man, and to help meld that bridge back up, he had to come back again. That's the whole thing behind, especially if you read, I think it's Daniel. I'm going to remember my Bible prophecy off the top of my head, I'm afraid. But if you read most of the Old Testament, it's about how he's going to come. He's going to go in the ground. He's going to come out of the ground. He's going to help connect man back with God. The connection that was divided in the fall. That is the whole point of Jesus' sacrifice. That's the whole point of atonement. That he's helping mankind to not die, to conquer death. That's basically what it's about. There is no atoning for people by sin in hell. There is no parole here. That is what he's there for. He's there. He came back and sent to the right hand of God to help mend the bridge, because he's God and man, to help to mend the bridge between God and men. That's it. Anyway, let's continue.
That's the way I look at it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's still no atoning for anything here. So, in my view of the salvation message, this is me talking now, which is that the wages of sin, being eternal ungoodness, whatever it might be, are death here, and then eternal ungoodness of whatever sort. Now, God provided a substitute for us, so we didn't have to suffer that, right? So our debt is paid in full. So if we accept it by the act of the cross, it's paid in full. So if we do not accept this, right? We do not accept this idea that Jesus is this pattern of life and all this kind of stuff. Then we end our lives here, and then we go on to eternal ungoodness because we did not accept this. We did not say yay to it. Now I understand that you say everybody's going to be redeemed in the end. I do believe I do, whatever the term is for that, but I think that's your understanding of it, and that's fine. So I don't understand. This whole redemption message is just kind of crock to me then. But, okay, so if I do not accept this, I, upon death, will suffer ungoodness for all my mistakes and da-da-da. But, because a Christian, if they can rely upon the cross as paying the wages for their sin, which, in my humble opinion, would mean there is someone who is suffering eternal ungoodness on their behalf. Do you see that?
Yeah, that's a view that many fundamentalists do take, and it's not something that most people in most denominations of Christianity take. The force they take is that people who do not accept Jesus is righteous on the cross are saved by their own good deeds, or by being just basically good people. They do not necessarily have to accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Saviour. They just have to accept what he taught. And I think a lot of non-believers, I'm not going to use the word atheist, but because I'm talking like maybe like your Hindus, Muslims, well, not even Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, that sort of thing, may believe in the ideas of charity, may ideas be good to their neighbour, so forth, and not necessarily believe in the Jesus message, but will be saved through that action. Because, again, doing these things are good exploit that salvation can come through works. That's an idea that we may have to go into a bit later, because some people believe it's salvation through faith, some people believe salvation works. I believe salvation through works, because salvation through faith can be a lot misleading because you're getting because what is that the strength of your faith? Is it how meaningful you mean it? Because that's very whereas works is something that we can actually measure, and there's much more things that I think people should work towards. But that's a personal theological position I hold. Anyway, let's continue.
So you go on to say he came to conquer evil by his death, and death is the ultimate evil, which is, once again, we have to discuss this because I have a totally different concept of what evil is, and death is not evil to me, based on the concept of evil I have. It's not the nicest thing, not good, but not evil. Now you go.
I was speaking in relation to the Genesis account where it talks about death being the ultimate punishment of mankind and being the ultimate evil that they would know, having fallen from grace from God. That's what I was talking about. I was talking about it in a conceptual and metaphysical matter. I wasn't talking about it in a physical matter. Sometimes I do that. It's a failing of mine, unfortunately, that sometimes I can be unspecific in my language use. But I'll be very specific right now. I was talking about the fall and death being visited on mankind as a fall from grace from God. And that was an ultimate evil that was trespassed upon them for falling from grace of God. And that they had to now share in Satan's fate. Well, not Satan's fate, but in the fate of those who had trespassed against God in the past. So, there you go.
I want to talk about accountability, because I talk about, in this system, there doesn't seem to be any accountability. Because even if you go and ask forgiveness of somebody, like you say, you have to go and ask forgiveness of the person you wronged, and then you can go and ask God. So even if I did, I went and said, blah, blah, I'm really sorry I did that. And they say, up yours, I'm not going to forgive you. Does that then preclude me from going to Jesus and getting forgiveness? Because if it does, then that's a lot of power the unforgiver has to keep me from eternal bliss instead of going to eternal goodness, because I would not be forgiven because that person didn't forgive me. Well, what is that person's dead? I think it all has to do with your mindset, right? Completely, right? It's your mindset. If you turned and you said, I am really sorry, that was stupid of me, whatever it was, and you honestly did, and you turned away from it, the whole turning away from things, and they still did not forgive you, well, the ball's in their court. See you later. Now you can turn to Jesus because your heart is there. And you can be forgiven for that. So in the end, that person who you wronged still does not feel that the accountability was made, because Jesus forgave you. There's no accounting. It's as simple as that. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, but that is accountability. You've tried to apologise. You've tried to right the wrong you did. And if that person's a Christian, they're supposed to forgive you. Because forgiveness is a very Christian quality, as I discussed in my forgiveness video. And that is a quality that we're supposed to have. No, not every Christian does have it, I'll agree. But we're supposed to have it. And I think that it'd take a really mean person not to forgive you if you're honest and humble in your heart about being forgiven. Now, Jesus doesn't forgive you for that, but you have to work up that person as well to be forgiven in this world. Again, he doesn't, by the person forgiving you, doesn't automatically mean that Jesus is good for you or vice versa. You have to work hard to make that person forgive you. You have to be, humble. You have to be whatever. You have to be repentful, and yeah, you have to ask Jesus to forgive you as well. But He'll give you the strength in yourself to ask that person to forgive you. That's the whole idea of forgiveness: is that you are dependent on Jesus to help you be forgiven. Because on your own, you're not going to be. I'm sorry about that. Because we all have our own egos, and we have our own, self adulation of, well, I can never be wrong about that, or I can never be, incorrect about that. I wasn't wrong about that. I was right about that. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say, for example, I don't know how you like to drink Rictus, but we'll do a drink thing. Let's say you go for a couple of beers with your mates down the pub, and some guy doesn't like the way you're looking at his girlfriend, and he swipes a punch at you. And then you come, and then you move out of the way, and the guy falls flat on his face, and whatever. Now, and then you come back the next day and you apologise to the bartender and say, "I'm sorry about that." Now, the bartender's a Christian; he's supposed to forgive you. If he's not, then Jesus, and you've asked Jesus to forgive you, he's going to hand you to basically grow a pair of, I don't say balls, but grow some, self worth, and to basically say, I messed up, while I don't think personally I did anything wrong, maybe he mistook anything I did to that. Yeah, I did look at his girlfriend, but I was looking maybe at the pool table or whatever, and he mistook anything I'd done. But again, I'm still at fault here for what I did. It's all about personal responsibility. You have a responsibility, and the idea of repentance is that Jesus will help you repent to the person you wronged. It isn't about Jesus, you get forgiven to Jesus and then you're automatically forgiven. It doesn't work like that. You go to Jesus for forgiveness and he'll help you gain forgiveness from that other person. It isn't that he forgives you and all is forgiven. It doesn't work like that.
So, you have to be responsible for your own actions, of course. I agree with you. Thank you. But you say that's the whole message of the substitutionary atonement, and it's a 180 from that, sir. The way I look at it, the way I see it, the way I've read about it, the way I understand it, even the way you've described it to me, it's still a 180 from that. So he died so that he could rip away what is evil in us. So once again, the evil thing I really want to discuss. Evil.
I'm going to be harsh now, but I'm going to do it in a really fun way. How is that a 180? Substitutional atonement is about somebody helping you conquer what is easy and evil in the world. He's about self-responsibility. You have a responsibility for the thing he did for you on the cross. You have a responsibility to your fellow mankind to act a certain way because he said to act a certain way. You have because he acted a certain way. I mean, here's a man who was beaten, who was, flogged, who was, spit upon, who was laughed at, who was ridiculed, who was, lied about, who was all these other things, and he did very little in response. He got a little bit cross when the only time he got a little bit cross in the Bible is when he found out they were turning the temple into some sort of money changing thing. And let's face it, we'd all get a bit wrong if, let's say, for example, we go into our mum and dad's house and if they were turning it into a cash and carry, we'd all be a bit miffed, let's put it that way, and we'd all turn over a table all the time. But that's the whole thing, is that he set this example that you have to follow. And if you don't follow that, that's fine for you. Again, I choose to follow that example because it's made my life better and it's made me a better person. And it's given me a ton of responsibility because I had the responsibility to know that that guy died on the cross so that I can be now free to enjoy an eternal life if I act a certain way. And that's a hell of a responsibility to carry on my shoulders. That's a hell of a responsibility that all Christians have to carry on their shoulders. And saying that it's a 180 is just fallacious, in my opinion. But again, that's my opinion.
A number of times you bring it up. Now, in the end here, you say that he basically jumps in front of the bullet for you. So what is this bullet? Well, isn't this bullet the wages of sin, death? So why is he still alive then in heaven? This bullet must not be as lethal as advertised, because that bullet is meant for us, and that bullet is meant for each and every one of us. That eternal ungoodness, unless we take Jesus and we accept that him jumping in front of the bullet for us.
Actually, I misspoke. I should have rephrased it differently. I should have said he removed the bullet. There is no bullet anymore. That's the whole point. There is no bullet. There is no bullet. There is no way to say. There's no nothing. There's eternal life. That's it.
ends up being a rubber bullet. I don't know. Even the way you explain it, we got to get together, I guess, Gary. Talk this out, because even the way you explain it, you have some different ideas, interesting ones, but in the end, it's still the same thing to me. There's no accountability. There's no accounting for this thing that God wants accounted for. So, and even humans want accounted for. Because, I mean, let's face it, a lot of these ideas have been dreamt up by us to right the wrongs of life here, and thinking that, oh, eventually they will be righted, no matter what, how wrong or when it happens, it will be righted, whether here or in the afterlife. The rights will be wronged, and whatever it is, or wrongs will be righted, and all this stuff. But it doesn't even happen that way. We can discuss it. You can change my mind, or...
Well, the whole thing about Jesus' death is responsibility. We Christians now have a responsibility to the world to act a certain way, to live a certain way, and to not fear death anymore. That's the whole idea. Now, I do understand that idea has been perverted by some people, but it's an idea. Like any other day, there is cause for perversions of it, and I think that's the problem of man, basically. But he did set a template that, you know, evil while being easy is not something that is not a road we should go down. You know, we have Jesus' way, which may not be the easiest, but leads to greater things in life. You know, you get greater respect, you get greater love, you get greater admiration, and I think that's the whole point about substitutional atonement. Is that now we don't have to fear death anymore. Death is something that has been conquered, and we can live better full lives, even if we're going to get something that we know is truly evil and might kill us. It's not going to kill us in the end because we can overcome it. That's the whole idea of substitutional atonement.
Or persuade me otherwise, if you can. I'll talk to you later. Take care.
Anyway, that's the end of that. I hope you didn't find anything I said too harsh. It was meant to respond to the points you brought up, and hopefully you now better know my position. Well, the things that I argued that I didn't hold, I was arguing because, again, you come from a more fundamentalist mindset. I was arguing against those. Again, if you want to know my actual position, I'll tell you. But again, I always hold to the argument that you should be able to argue a position even you hold it. And if you go back to the original video, I said I don't really hold to the idea of Jesus going into hell and dying for us. That's really a more reformed fundamentalist tradition idea. I don't say it's about maybe 10-15% of that. But again, I understand that's where you're coming from, and that's the reason why I tried to argue with you in that percent. Because if you can argue with somebody on what they understand, maybe you can get them to understand where you're coming from on that. Anyway, Rictus, I look forward to any response you're doing, and I hope you didn't find anything I said too far. As I said, the other thing I would take back is the whole 180 fallacious thing, but I still hope for that. I don't think it's a 180. But again, maybe it's because you come across a different form of substitutionary atonement theory than what is taught orthodoxly. Anyway, we can discuss that later. This has been Phoneybeetlemaniacxs. It's my crew out.
It's growing thin, engines start burning, but I have no fear, 'cause I'm in is drowning, and I live by the river, London calling to the imitation zone. Forget it, brother, you can go it alone. London calling to the zombies of death. We hold them out and draw another breath.